On our company's annual winter retreat, my husband Marcus cornered me in the wine cellar and whispered, "The FBI will be here in an hour. You're going to prison for 50 million in fraud." Little did he know, I had already planted the evidence on his phone, and as the agents handcuffed him instead, I leaned close and said, "You tried to destroy me, darling. Now watch your empire crumble." The champagne glass trembled in my hand, not from the mountain cold seeping through the lodge windows but from the weight of what was coming. Across the grand hall, Marcus raised his own glass, his investment banker smile gleaming in the firelight. He had no idea this weekend retreat would be his last as a free man. Before I tell you how a corporate lawyer outsmarted a financial predator, I want to thank you for joining this journey. If you enjoy stories of justice served cold, hit that subscribe button. It supports the channel and ensures you never miss a tale of reckoning. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 years. That's how long it took for perfection to crack and reveal the rot underneath. I remember the day we met at Morrison & Associates charity gala, both of us reaching for the same auction paddle on a vintage Rolex. His steel blue eyes crinkled when he insisted I take it. "Beautiful things belong to beautiful people," he'd said, and I'd fallen for both the charm and the precisely timed words. Our courtship was choreographed perfection. Weekend ski trips to Whistler, surprise reservations at Vancouver's most exclusive restaurants, thoughtful gifts that showed he paid attention. Marcus knew exactly how to make a woman feel special. Special enough to miss the calculating way he studied my career trajectory, the careful questions about my family's real estate portfolio, the gleam behind those tender gazes when I mentioned my late father's trust fund. The proposal came during a Northern Lights tour in Yukon. Aurora Borealis dancing overhead as he knelt in the snow, the ring catching green and purple reflections. It was his grandmother's, he claimed. I would later learn it belonged to someone else entirely, a woman named Sophia Martinez who supposedly died in a car accident after losing everything in a securities fraud case. But that night in the Yukon cold, it sparkled with nothing but promise. Our wedding was Vancouver's event of the season. The Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom draped in white orchids and crystal, string quartet playing as we exchanged vows beneath an arch of winter roses. I can still picture Marcus's face as he slipped the wedding band onto my finger. His touch gentle, his words honey-sweet. Forever, he'd promised. Another perfectly crafted lie. The first year was bliss, or what I thought was bliss. Marcus was the perfect husband, attentive, thoughtful, ambitious. He brought me coffee every morning, remembered every anniversary monthly, surprised me with spa weekends when my cases ran late. My colleagues envied our relationship, called us the power couple destined to run Vancouver's legal and financial sectors. If they only knew how perfectly he was setting the stage. Looking at him now across the retreat's welcome dinner, I see the masterful performance for what it is. The way he adjusts his Patek Philippe watch, checking the time, a nervous tell I've learned to read. The slight tremor in his hand as he reaches for his scotch. He's anxious tonight, though he hides it well. 3 months of studying your predator teaches you their every nuance. "You look stunning tonight," he says, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that once made my heart race. Now I hear the undertones, the careful manipulation in each syllable. My emerald dress was his suggestion. "It matches your eyes perfectly, darling. Wear it for the opening dinner." The emeralds were a gift from him last month, probably meant to be evidence of his generosity when the investigation began. I take another sip of champagne, watching him over the rim of my glass. The vintage is exceptional, a bottle the company saved for this annual executive retreat. Marcus had insisted we attend together this year, his own special touch for what he planned to be my final appearance in polite society. The irony isn't lost on me. "Remember our first date?" he asks, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass. "That restaurant on Robson Street. You barely touched your meal." Of course I remember. The same calculated charm, the same predatory focus disguised as devotion. "You made me nervous," I reply, the words true despite everything. "I couldn't believe someone like you was interested in someone like me. How could I not be?" His fingers reach across to touch my hand, a gesture that used to send shivers down my spine. "You were everything I was looking for. Young, successful, trusting, with assets worth manipulating." But he didn't count on one thing: love can turn to ice when betrayed. And ice preserves a lawyer's resolve far longer than passion ever could. The truth began unraveling 3 months ago on a Tuesday morning at our favorite coffee shop. Marcus had grabbed what he thought was his phone from the table, but in his rush to catch a meeting, he'd taken mine. An hour later, standing in my office at Morrison & Associates, I realized the sleek black case in my hand wasn't my phone. It was identical. But the lock screen showed a photo I'd never seen. Marcus in Monaco, arm around a brunette who wasn't me. My fingers trembled as I tried his birthday, our anniversary, his mother's name. Nothing. Then, almost as an afterthought, I tried the date we met. The phone unlocked. Inside lay folders upon folders of encrypted files, but Marcus had gotten sloppy. His password manager was still logged in. What I found in the next 3 hours changed everything. Bank statements showing a web of offshore accounts. Property deeds in names I didn't recognize. Insurance policies on wives, plural. Wives. The word echoed in my mind like a death knell, but it was the folder labeled exit strategy that stopped my heart. Sophia Martinez, 34, securities lawyer. Married Marcus Sterling, then using the name Mark Sullivan, in 2015. Accused of $30 million fraud in 2017. Died in single car accident before trial. Case closed, accounts drained. Marcus moved to Seattle. Jennifer Park, 29, investment analyst. Married Marcus, as Michael Brennan, in 2018. Accused of embezzlement in 2020. Vanished before arraignment. Presumed fled to Asia. Accounts emptied. Marcus moved to Vancouver. And there, dated 3 weeks ago, Victoria Chen, 32, corporate lawyer. Projected accusation, $50 million securities fraud. Timeline, annual retreat February 14 to 17. Method, transfer through her partnership accounts during mandatory off-grid weekend. Accusation date, February 17. Expected outcome, arrest, asset seizure, reputation destroyed. Projected completion, March 2025. The room spun as pieces clicked into place. His insistence on joint accounts for transparency. The subtle pressure to add him to my partnership documents in case something happened. The new financial software he'd installed on my laptop to help organize our investments. His unusual interest in this year's retreat location, a remote lodge with spotty cell service and limited internet, where he could make moves without immediate detection. That night, I smiled through dinner and pretended everything was normal. Inside, ice crystallized around my heart, preserving the betrayal like evidence in a case file. Marcus kissed my forehead, asked about my day, never noticing the shift. He was too focused on his timeline. I spent that first night studying the documents, memorizing accounts and tracking patterns. Marcus Sterling was a ghost, a phantom who slipped from city to city, leaving broken lives and empty accounts in his wake. Each wife had been carefully selected, successful, wealthy, trusting. Each had been systematically destroyed, their professional reputations obliterated before they could fight back. The next morning, I began my own careful dance. As a corporate lawyer specializing in fraud cases, I knew exactly what evidence would hold up and what wouldn't. I hired a private investigator under the guise of researching opposing counsel. Patricia Moore, a retired RCMP detective, was thorough, discreet, and most importantly, specialized in financial crimes. Within 2 weeks, she uncovered more than I could have imagined. Marcus's business trips were carefully orchestrated meetings with money launderers and shell company operators. Each of his previous wives had shown similar patterns before their downfall: sudden involvement in suspicious transactions they couldn't explain, accounts they didn't open, transfers they didn't authorize. Their cases remained open, evidence inconclusive, while their joint accounts were drained by their grieving or betrayed husband. I watched him more carefully then, noting every detail with a lawyer's trained eye. The way he tested my memory with casual questions about our financial arrangements, how he documented my stress levels in concerned texts to my colleagues, the careful emails to our accountant about my increasing forgetfulness with deadlines. He was building his narrative, laying groundwork for my eventual accusation. The most chilling discovery came hidden in his cloud storage, a detailed timeline, clinical in its precision. My fraud was scheduled for the retreat weekend. Marcus always did appreciate symbolism. Valentine's Day weekend, the anniversary of when Sophia's world crumbled. Each night, I pretended normalcy, disposing of the financial access codes he'd been slowly feeding me, while secretly documenting everything he did. I started building my counter case, layer by layer. For every false account he opened in my name, I created a paper trail showing coercion. For every suspicious transfer he planned, I built evidence of his manipulation. I was doing what I did best, building an airtight case. The hardest part wasn't the planning. It was maintaining the facade. Listening to him discuss our future while knowing his intentions, feeling his touch and remembering I once craved it. Smiling at his jokes while picturing Sophia and Jennifer, destroyed and forgotten. But I had advantages they didn't. I was a fraud specialist who knew how to trace money and build cases. I had 3 months, not much, but enough for someone who'd built her career on rapid case preparation. And most importantly, I had rage that burned cold and sharp as a legal brief. My daily routine became cover for preparation. Morning runs were actually meetings with Patricia, comparing notes on Marcus's movements. Lunch hours were spent with my firm's forensic accountant, building a shadow version of every transaction Marcus planned. Evening yoga classes allowed me to meet with a federal prosecutor I'd worked with on previous cases off the record, hypothetically discussing what evidence would be needed to prove financial manipulation and identity fraud. The most challenging aspect was building my own defense while simultaneously constructing his prosecution. Every piece of evidence had to serve dual purposes, clearing my name while damning his. I created detailed logs of every financial access Marcus had to my accounts. I secretly recorded our conversations about money, capturing his subtle manipulations. I backed up everything to encrypted servers he couldn't access. As the retreat approached, I watched Marcus's excitement grow. He spent hours on calls in his office. I'd installed audio monitoring after finding the phone coordinating with his offshore contacts. Each detail was orchestrated to create the perfect crime scene. The lodge's limited connectivity, the mandatory digital detox policy that would explain delays in transaction alerts, the timing during a long weekend when financial institutions would be slow to respond. My own preparations entered their final phase. I'd created a comprehensive dossier linking Marcus to both previous wives, complete with financial forensics showing his pattern. I'd coordinated with Patricia to have surveillance on the lodge. Most importantly, I'd worked with the federal prosecutor to prepare a warrant ready to execute the moment Marcus made his move. Tonight, watching him check his Rolex for the 3rd time during dinner, I almost admire his dedication to the performance. 3 years of marriage, and he's never once slipped, never shown his true face. But then I remember Sophia, found dead in that convenient accident. Jennifer, disappeared and presumed fled. And my resolve hardens like ice over a Canadian lake. The wine steward arrives with our bottle, a vintage Marcus selected weeks ago. He insists on inspecting it himself, ever the sophisticated husband. His hands are steady as he nods approval, unaware that his carefully laid plans are about to unravel like a poorly constructed contract. I touch the small recording device concealed in my evening bag, feeling its weight like a promise. To new beginnings, he says, raising his glass. If only he knew how true those words would prove to be. The retreat lodge sits nestled in the Whistler backcountry, accessible only by private snow coach during winter months. The Sterling and Associates executive team, 20 partners and their spouses, gathered here every February for strategic planning, team building, and what Marcus called essential networking away from city distractions. This year, he'd been particularly insistent we attend together. The lodge is impressive, all timber and stone, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking snow-laden peaks. A massive fireplace dominates the great hall where we gathered for the opening reception. Everything is luxury and warmth, a beautiful facade hiding the trap Marcus had prepared. I arrived early, claiming I wanted to settle in before the group activities. The truth was I needed to position my equipment. The small camera disguised as a phone charger went in our suite's office area, where Marcus would make his transfers, the backup recording device hidden in a book on the nightstand. The tracking software already installed on his actual phone, the one he'd been using after we accidentally swapped back. Marcus arrived precisely on time, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, silver cufflinks catching the firelight. He crossed the room with that confident stride, greeting colleagues by name, playing the successful executive. I noticed how he positioned himself near the lodge manager, asking pointed questions about the Wi-Fi reliability, the cell service, the backup generators, setting the stage for his narrative about limited connectivity. "Darling, you look breathtaking," he said, kissing my cheek. His cologne Tom Ford Oud Wood brought back memories of countless romantic evenings. I wondered if Sophia had liked the same scent, if Jennifer had found it as intoxicating as I once did. The lodge manager announced dinner, and we filed into the dining hall. The table setting was immaculate white linens, crystal stemware, the company's logo etched on custom china. Marcus had requested our usual spots, seats 7 and 8, positioning us perfectly in the middle of the table. Maximum witnesses for normalcy, but far enough from leadership that our quiet conversations would go unnoticed. I touched the small device in my clutch, feeling its solid weight. The recording had already started, capturing everything. Timing would be crucial. Marcus would make his move during tomorrow's mandatory digital detox group activity, a 6-hour wilderness excursion where phones were prohibited. That's when he'd planned to access my laptop, execute the fraudulent transfers, and set the trap that would spring when we returned to civilization. But I'd already modified his timeline. The federal prosecutor had agents positioned in Whistler, waiting for my signal. The forensic trail I'd built would activate the moment Marcus touched my laptop. And most damaging of all, I'd arranged for a special guest to join us tomorrow, someone Marcus never expected to see again. "Remember our first retreat together?" Marcus asked, reaching for my hand across the table. His thumb traced circles on my palm, a gesture that used to make me melt. "You were so nervous about impressing the senior partners." I smiled, letting nostalgia color my voice. "You told me to just be myself. That my work would speak for itself. And it has." His eyes crinkled with what looked like genuine pride. "Look at you now, youngest equity partner in Morrison & Associates history. I'm so proud of you, Victoria." The words would have been touching if I didn't know their true purpose. Every compliment was documentation for later. See how supportive I was. How could I have known about her criminal activities? The betrayed husband routine he'd perfected with the others. The first course arrived seared scallops with citrus foam. Marcus had pre-ordered for both of us, naturally. "You never could resist their seafood," he commented, watching me take a careful bite. His attention to detail would have been touching if I didn't know its true purpose. As we ate, I felt the weight of the evening pressing around us. Each bite, each sip, each moment of casual conversation was leading us toward an inevitable conclusion. Marcus checked his watch again, his 4th time since we sat down. Waiting, anticipating, counting down to his moment. The other partners chatted about Q1 projections and market volatility. Their spouses discussed vacation plans and restaurant recommendations. Normal, pleasant conversation floating around us like smoke, obscuring the deadly game being played at seats 7 and 8. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowing with practiced concern. "You've seemed stressed lately. The Brennan case weighing on you?" There it was, more documentation. "Poor Victoria, so stressed, making mistakes. Just the usual pressure," I replied, my voice soft and slightly weary, exactly what he'd expect. "Nothing I can't handle." "You work too hard, darling." His fingers squeezed mine. "Maybe after this retreat, we should take a vacation. Somewhere warm. The Maldives, perhaps. Just us. The Maldives. No extradition treaty. How convenient." I wondered if that's where he'd planned to disappear to once my accounts were drained and my reputation destroyed. "That sounds wonderful," I said, meaning it in a way he couldn't comprehend. By the time this weekend ended, the only trip Marcus would be taking was to a federal detention center. The main course arrived: braised short rib for him, wild salmon for me. His favorite, my preference. Another detail he'd memorized, another piece of the devoted husband performance. He cut into his meat with obvious pleasure, savoring each bite while discussing tomorrow's wilderness excursion with the colleague to his left. My own meal remained largely untouched, expected behavior for someone under stress. Marcus's eyes flickered with satisfaction at my apparent loss of appetite. Everything was proceeding according to his plan. Or so he thought. I raised my champagne glass, catching the firelight through the bubbles. The crystal chimed softly as I offered him a smile that held all the secrets of the past 3 months. "To us," I whispered, and to perfect timing. He raised his glass to meet mine, completely unaware that in exactly 18 hours, federal agents would be reading him his rights in this very room. The next morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight streaming through gaps in the curtains to paint geometric patterns across our suite. Marcus was already awake, sitting at the desk with his laptop, catching up on emails before the digital detox began. I watched him from the bed, noting how his fingers moved across the keyboard, not typing emails, but checking accounts, confirming access codes, preparing for the afternoon's activities. "Morning, darling," he said without turning around. "Sleep well?" Like the dead, I replied, the dark humor lost on him. I rose and moved to the bathroom, catching his reflection in the mirror. The moment I closed the door, I saw him pull out a small notebook, jotting something down. Coordinates. Final access codes. It didn't matter. Every move he made was being recorded by 3 different devices. The lodge's breakfast was elaborate fresh pastries, local honey, artisanal preserves. The executive team gathered around the great table, discussing the day's planned 6-hour snowshoe trek through the backcountry. Marcus had volunteered to stay behind, claiming a pulled muscle. How convenient. How perfectly timed. Are you sure you'll be okay here alone? I asked, playing my part. I can stay with you. Nonsense. His smile was warm, reassuring. You should go. Network with the senior partners. I'll just rest and maybe catch up on some reading. Reading, that's what he was calling it now. More like executing 50 million in fraudulent transfers. The group departed at 10 a.m. sharp, led by 2 experienced guides. I made a show of joining them, bundled in my Columbia parka, snowshoes strapped to my boots. We trekked for exactly 20 minutes, just long enough to be out of sight of the lodge before I feigned a twisted ankle. I'm so sorry, I said to the guide, wincing convincingly. I think I need to head back. Please don't let me ruin everyone else's day. Concern rippled through the group, but Marcus's colleague John offered to escort me back. We can't have you walking alone, he insisted. Perfect. A witness to confirm I returned early, but one who wouldn't be present for what came next. John saw me safely to the lodge, where I insisted I'd be fine with ice and rest. The moment he disappeared back down the trail, I moved into position. The suite was quiet when I entered through the back service entrance Patricia had arranged access to. Through the crack in the office door, I could see Marcus at my laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. On the screen, I recognized my partnership account interface, the one only I should have access to. He'd been planning this for months, installing keyloggers and screenshot software, collecting my credentials one careful piece at a time. I pulled out my phone, sending a simple text to Patricia. It's happening. Then I activated the screen recording software I'd secretly installed on my own laptop weeks ago. Every keystroke Marcus made, every account he accessed, every fraudulent transfer he executed, all being documented in real time, uploaded to secured servers, time-stamped and verified. I watched as he navigated through carefully constructed shell companies, transferring funds that would appear to come from my authorization. $50 million, spread across a dozen transactions, each designed to look like I was embezzling from client escrow accounts. It was masterful, really. If I hadn't known better, even I might have believed I was guilty. He worked for 2 hours, methodical and precise. This was Marcus in his element, no charm, no performance, just cold calculation. I recorded it all from my hidden position, watching the man I'd married reveal himself as the predator he'd always been. At 1 p.m. his phone buzzed. He smiled at the message confirmation from his offshore contacts that the transfers were complete. He carefully cleared the laptop's history, replaced everything exactly as he'd found it, and returned to the living area to wait for my return. What he didn't know was that every transfer he'd made had triggered alerts I'd pre-programmed. Every account he'd touched had been flagged by federal monitoring I'd arranged. And every second of his activity had been documented by forensic software that would hold up in any court. I waited another hour before making my entrance, bursting through the main door with manufactured distress. Marcus. Oh God. I'm so glad you're here. He jumped up, concern perfectly painted on his face. Victoria. What happened? Your ankle. Forget my ankle. I let my voice shake, my hands tremble. I just got a call from the firm. They're saying there are suspicious transactions on my partnership account. Marcus, they're talking about millions of dollars. I don't understand what's happening. His arms came around me, solid and reassuring. The devoted husband comforting his distraught wife. Slow down, darling. What exactly did they say? Federal investigators are involved. They think I broke off, letting tears well up. They think I've been embezzling from client accounts. Marcus, I would never. Of course you wouldn't. His voice was soothing, but I felt him relax slightly. The trap was springing exactly as he'd planned. This must be some kind of mistake. We'll get to the bottom of it. Do they want you to come back to Vancouver? They want me to stay put. They're sending investigators here. I pulled back to look at him, noting the flash of satisfaction he quickly masked as concern. They said something about jurisdiction and securing evidence before I could. Before I could flee. Flee? That's insane. He guided me to the sofa, his hands gentle on my shoulders. You haven't done anything wrong. We'll hire the best defense attorney in Vancouver. We'll fight this. You believe me? I looked up at him, letting vulnerability show. Even with all that evidence they say they have. I know you, Victoria. You're not capable of fraud. His fingers brushed my cheek, a gesture I'd once found tender. Now I recognized it for what it was: assessment, checking to see if his manipulation was working. Whatever this is, we'll handle it together. I promise. The beautiful lie hung between us like poisoned air. Together. Right up until the moment he vanished to the Maldives with my money and my ruined reputation. A knock at the door interrupted his performance. Miss Chen? I'm Special Agent Rodriguez with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Marcus's face went pale, not with fear but with confusion. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. The investigators weren't supposed to arrive until tomorrow, after he'd had time to establish his alibi, after he'd coordinated with his lawyers, after he'd positioned himself as the shocked, betrayed husband. I opened the door to reveal Agent Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. Behind her stood 2 more agents and, most importantly, a woman I'd spent the last month tracking down. Sophia? Marcus breathed, recognition and horror dawning simultaneously. Sophia Martinez stepped forward, very much alive despite the death certificate Marcus had in his files. Hello, Michael. Or is it Marcus now? Hard to keep track of all your names. I watched the color drain completely from his face as the pieces started clicking together for him. You're dead. The accident. Staged. Sophia's smile was cold. With federal protection, given what I knew about your operation. Turns out faking your death is surprisingly easy when you have the government on your side. Agent Rodriguez moved further into the room, her credentials prominently displayed. Marcus Sterling, also known as Michael Brennan and Mark Sullivan. We have warrants for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. This is insane, Marcus said, his voice taking on that same soothing tone he'd used on me moments before. I'm the victim here. My wife is the one being investigated for embezzlement. I was just trying to help her understand. Help her? Agent Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Is that what you call accessing her laptop without authorization and executing 50 million in fraudulent transfers from her accounts? His eyes snapped to me, understanding finally blooming. You knew. I stood, setting down the victim act like a costume I no longer needed. I found your phone 3 months ago, Marcus. The one with all your plans, your timelines, your previous wives. I know about Sophia. I know about Jennifer Park, who's also very much alive and cooperating with authorities. By the way. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, everything. That's impossible. You couldn't have. I'm a corporate fraud specialist, darling. I let the endearment drip with contempt. Did you really think you could outmaneuver me in my own specialty? Every transfer you made today, I authorized recording software to document it. Every account you accessed, already flagged by federal monitors. Every piece of evidence you tried to plant, traced back to you through forensic analysis. Agent Rodriguez produced handcuffs. We've been building this case for 3 months, Mr. Sterling. Miss Chen has been cooperating fully, providing us with documentation of your methods, your patterns, your previous victims. You're done. Marcus looked at me, really looked at me, for perhaps the first time in our marriage. You set me up. No, I corrected, my voice steady and cold. You set yourself up. I just documented it. There's a difference, one I imagine you'll have plenty of time to contemplate. As they led him away, he turned back one last time. You're just like me, Victoria. We're the same. No, Marcus. I met his eyes without flinching. I'm better. You did this for money. I did it for justice. For Sophia, for Jennifer, for the woman I used to be before you tried to destroy her. The door closed behind them, and suddenly the suite was quiet except for Sophia's soft breathing beside me. She'd been my secret weapon, the ace I'd kept hidden until the perfect moment. Finding her alive had been Patricia's masterwork, tracking her through witness protection, convincing her to come forward, building the case that would finally stop Marcus's pattern. Thank you, Sophia said quietly. for finishing what I couldn't. Thank you for trusting me. I turned to her, seeing myself reflected in her eyes, the same betrayal, the same rage, the same determination to ensure he never did this to anyone else. You gave me the courage to fight instead of run. 6 months later, I stood in my new office overlooking Cole Harbor, watching the seaplanes take off and land like mechanical birds. The brass nameplate on the door read Chen Advocacy Group Financial Justice Consulting. The firm was small, just me and 2 associates, but our reputation was growing. We specialized in helping women navigate financial abuse, identify manipulation, and build legal cases against predators like Marcus. The consultation requests came daily: women who discovered hidden accounts, suspicious transactions, partners with shadowy pasts. Marcus was serving 20 years in a federal prison. His appeals exhausted, his empire of fake identities dismantled. Sophia had used the settlement money to start a nonprofit for fraud victims. Jennifer had returned from hiding and was rebuilding her life in Toronto. 3 women, 3 survivors, 3 different paths forward from the same predator. My assistant knocked softly. Miss Chen, your 4 o'clock is here. A Mrs. Blackwood. She says her husband is planning something, but she's not sure what. I closed my laptop, gathering my legal pad and pen. Send her in. Amanda Blackwood was 42, impeccably dressed, with eyes that held the same haunted look I'd seen in my own mirror a year ago. She sat across from me, twisting her wedding ring nervously. I don't know if I'm being paranoid, she began, but my husband has been acting strange. Secret phone calls, unusual financial requests, pressure to sign new documents. And yesterday, I found a folder on his computer. What did the folder contain? I asked, though something in my gut already knew the answer. Photos of other women. Women who look like me. And newspaper articles about their deaths or disappearances. Her voice cracked. Miss Chen, I think my husband has done this before. I think I might be next. I studied her face, seeing the same intelligence that had saved my life, the same fear that came with knowing too much, the same desperate hope that someone would believe her. I pulled out my intake form, my pen poised. Tell me everything, I said. And I mean everything. We're going to build a case that will not only protect you but ensure he never does this to anyone else. As she began to talk, I felt that familiar cold clarity settle over me. The skills Marcus had inadvertently taught me: the attention to detail, the patience in planning, the understanding of how predators think I was using them all now. Not for revenge but for protection. Not for destruction, but for justice. Some people might say I'd crossed a line, that setting up Marcus made me no better than him. But as I listened to Amanda describe her husband's escalating control, his subtle financial manipulations, his carefully constructed lies, I knew the difference. Marcus destroyed to take. I destroyed to protect. Marcus built his empire on victims. I built mine on survivors. The game, it seemed, was far from over. It had simply evolved, and so had I. Only now, I was playing for the other side.